The first time Matteo Romano saw the bruises, he didn't say a word. He just stared. She tried to pull her sleeve back down, but it was too late. The damage was already done. Valentina's arm was shaking as she reached for the piano keys. She said she'd fallen on the subway stairs. She smiled while she said it, but her eyes were screaming. Matteo had seen bruises like that before, on the wrong women in the wrong places for the wrong reasons. But never in his house, never this close to his son. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He watched her leave like a man watching someone walk into traffic. Slow, powerless, but calculating every move. And that night, he did something he hadn't done in years. He cared. Because Valentina Russo wasn't just a piano teacher anymore. She had become a problem. And Matteo Romano didn't let problems like that go unsolved. What she didn't know was this: she had just triggered a war. A war that would burn through mansions, tear down charities, destroy reputations, and shake the bones of the city's richest men. All because a mafia boss saw something he wasn't supposed to see, and decided not to look away. But before we get to that, let me take you back to where it all began.
Hi, my amazing friends and family, welcome back to another story for today. If you are ready to enjoy this heartwarming story, smash the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. I love seeing all your names and places. Also, don't forget to check out more of our interesting videos on the channel. And guess what? Tomorrow, I have got an even more exciting story to share with you that I know you'll love. Now back to the story.
It started with music. Not screams. Not blood. Not bullets. Just the trembling notes of a 10-year-old boy trying to find the next key. The Romano penthouse glowed gold from the dying sun. The windows stretched higher than some buildings. White marble floors reflected the light like glass. Expensive silence sat in the corners. Thick, heavy, waiting. Matteo Romano sat in his usual chair. Same drink, same suit, same unreadable face. His son, Nico, sat on the bench, small hands spread across black and white keys. He was trying, really trying, but every note he hit seemed to get shakier. Slow, Valentina whispered beside him. Breathe through it. Music listens when you ask it nicely. Her voice was soft, sweet like honey in warm tea. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, her back straight, her blouse tucked into a long navy skirt. The sunlight touched the side of her face, catching the high cheekbones and the quiet sadness she never let slip. Matteo watched her the way you'd watch a magician. Not because you liked the trick, but because you wanted to know what was real. Nico missed a note. He groaned and slapped his hands on his thighs. Okay, Valentina smiled, kneeling beside him. Mozart didn't get it right the first time either. You weren't watching him, Nico muttered. She laughed. True, but I imagine he looked just like you. Frustrated and fidgety and about to storm off. Nico smiled. Matteo didn't. His glass made a soft click as he placed it down on the table beside him. He hadn't smiled in days. Valentina reached over to flip the sheet music. And that was when it happened. Her sleeve slid back. Just a little, but enough. Matteo's eyes narrowed. The sunlight hit her skin just right. It made the bruises glow like secrets. A cluster of them, deep purple and yellowed at the edges. Ugly things. They wrapped around her arm like fingerprints. She froze. Matteo didn't blink. She tugged her sleeve down fast. Too fast. Her fingers trembled. She said, her voice lighter now, rushed and fake. Fell down the subway stairs. Yesterday. Total mess. Don't laugh. No one was laughing. Not Nico. Not her. And definitely not Matteo. He leaned forward just slightly. His tattooed fingers rested on the edge of the chair like claws waiting to close. Valentina cleared her throat and looked down at the sheet music again. Let's try the left hand again, Nico. From the fifth measure. But Nico just stared at her. His eyes weren't on the page. They were on her arm. Matteo spoke. His voice was low, quiet, dangerous. Enough for today. Valentina turned. Sorry. Matteo stood. The room felt colder now. Lesson's over, he said, already walking toward the hallway. Enzo will drive you home. Valentina opened her mouth to speak. Maybe to argue. Maybe to say thank you. But nothing came out. Instead, she nodded. Her hands were shaking again. She packed the sheet music quickly. One page fell to the floor. She reached for it. Nico beat her to it. He handed it to her silently. His small fingers brushed against hers. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't answer. She walked toward the front door, her heels clicking too loud in the quiet room. Matteo didn't turn to look at her. He stood by the window, staring out over the city like he was already searching for something. Or someone. As she reached the elevator, Valentina looked back once. Matteo was just a shadow in the gold light. But even shadows can burn. The car ride was silent. Enzo drove like a man with no past and no patience. Black suit, sunglasses, jaw set like stone. Valentina didn't try to speak. She sat in the back seat like a ghost, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The bruise on her arm throbbed beneath her sleeve. Her mind screamed at her to run, to disappear. But where? She had already tried to leave Julian once. And that's when the bruises started. Back at the penthouse, Matteo stood still in the middle of the living room. Nico had gone to his room. The music had stopped. The silence was back. Enzo returned, stepping through the door without a word. Well, Matteo said. She didn't say anything, Enzo replied. Not a word the whole ride. Matteo's jaw tightened. I want everything, he said. Her address, her phone records, where she goes, who she talks to. I want to know what subway line she takes and what trash she throws out. Enzo nodded once. Tonight. Matteo turned toward the piano. He reached out and touched one of the bruised keys. It made no sound. Start now. That night, Valentina didn't sleep. She locked the door 3 times, checked the windows, checked them again. Julian was out. Fundraising event, he said. Charity gala. Handshakes, smiles, champagne. She stood in the bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror. The bruise was worse now. It looked like a rotten flower blooming up her arm. She touched it gently, flinched. Her reflection looked back at her like a stranger. And for the first time in weeks, she thought of someone who made her feel safe. Not Julian, not her parents, but a man with tattoos on his hands and danger in his voice. Matteo Romano. The way he looked at her today, like he already knew everything. Enzo's team worked fast. By sunrise, Matteo had a file on his desk. Name Valentina Russo. Age 33. Music instructor. Conservatory trained. No criminal record. But there were red flags. The kind of flags that don't wave, just bleed. Her emergency contact was Julian Marks. Doctor of public philanthropy. Only he wasn't a doctor. He wasn't even listed on medical records. No licenses. No board certifications. But he had money. And the foundation he ran? Matteo had seen names like that before. On money laundering shells. Fake schools. Dummy charities. He flipped through the pages slowly. Photos. Logs. Donations. High society galas. And a list of scholarship recipients. Girls. All between 15 and 25. All foreign. All gone. Matteo closed the file. The bruise wasn't the story. It was the start. Later that day, Valentina returned for another lesson. She looked tired. Her blouse had long sleeves again. No smile this time. Nico greeted her politely. He didn't mention the bruise, but he looked at her arm. She noticed. Matteo didn't come out right away. He watched through the glass wall of his office. He watched her posture, her flinch, the way she looked at the front door like someone might come through at any second. She didn't touch the piano the whole time. She just sat beside Nico, coaching softly, correcting gently, like she was trying to be invisible. Matteo had seen this before, with women who were bought and used like things, with girls who smiled because they didn't know how to scream anymore. When the lesson ended, she stood slowly. "Thank you, Nico. You did well today." He nodded. "You're coming back tomorrow?" She hesitated, then smiled. "If I can." Matteo stepped out of his office. She froze. He walked toward her, slow and calm. His eyes didn't blink. "You said it was the stairs," he said. She swallowed. "Yes. Lying doesn't suit you." She lowered her eyes. He looked at her hands. No ring, no jewelry, just bruises hiding beneath fabric and fear. "I won't ask again," he said. "But if you ever need to disappear, don't knock. Just come here." She looked up. Her eyes were full, and her voice, when it came, was barely more than breath. "Why would you help me?" Matteo tilted his head slightly. He didn't smile. "I don't like bruises in my house." Outside, across the street, a black car was parked. Inside it, Julian Marks watched through binoculars. His smile was small, controlled. The bruise had done its job. She had come back to him after the first one. She would come back again. He didn't know that someone was already watching him, tracking him, waiting. Because when Matteo Romano saw a bruise, he didn't call the police. He didn't write a report. He started a war. And this war had just begun. Julian Marks always smiled like he knew secrets no one else did. Even now, as he sat across the candlelit table from Valentina, he wore that same look. Easy, polished, cold beneath the charm. The restaurant was too perfect. Low lights, gold cutlery, waiters who walked like ghosts. Everyone here wore money like perfume. But Valentina looked like a prisoner in silk. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. She kept her eyes on the glass of water in front of her, not touching the wine he ordered. Her smile was painted on, but her fear was real. Julian leaned forward, brushing something from her shoulder. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. She had learned not to. "You've been quiet tonight," he said softly, his voice smooth like cream in coffee. "Everything all right?" She nodded too quickly. "Just tired. Long day." He tilted his head. "You were at the Romano penthouse again, weren't you?" Valentina hesitated. Julian's smile widened. "I can smell the marble and fear," he whispered with a chuckle. "That place always makes people act polite, like it's a church instead of a fortress." Valentina forced a soft laugh. "It's just a lesson, Julian. For a child." "A child," he repeated, sipping his wine. "And his father. Don't forget that part." Valentina looked down at her plate. She hadn't touched her food. Julian reached across the table, gently touching her wrist. His fingers landed right where the bruise still hid beneath her sleeve. She tensed, but stayed still. "You know I'm proud of you," he said, his voice like a lullaby with knives inside. "But you're pushing it lately, talking back, pulling away." He squeezed slightly. "Let's not ruin what we've built over one little lesson. All right?" Valentina nodded again. Her voice was barely there. "Of course." But outside, sitting in a nondescript black SUV, someone else was watching. Enzo, Matteo's right hand, his shadow, his cleaner. He sat in the driver's seat, chewing a toothpick and watching through the restaurant window like a hawk watching prey move too close to a cliff. He had followed Valentina from her apartment earlier that day, watched her board the subway, watched her walk too carefully, too quietly. Now he watched the man with the white teeth and expensive words touch her like she was property. He took photos. He sent texts. Matteo needed proof. Enzo wasn't just gathering it. He was stacking it like firewood. Back at the penthouse, Matteo played chess with Nico. Or at least, he moved pieces while Nico stared off into space. "You're distracted," Matteo said. Nico looked up. "Is Miss Valentina okay?" Matteo didn't answer right away. He moved a pawn forward. "She's fine." Nico frowned. "She looked scared yesterday. I didn't say anything, but I saw her hand shaking." Matteo studied his son. He saw his mother in him. The same way of noticing things and staying quiet until it mattered. "Fear is loud in silence," Matteo said. Nico blinked. "What?" "Never mind." He reached for his bishop, then stopped. His phone buzzed. One message from Enzo. "Got what you need. We'll talk at midnight." Matteo looked out the window. The city sparkled. But beneath it, something ugly crawled. He closed the game board. Bedtime. Valentina and Julian returned to her apartment just after 10. He didn't stay long, just enough to remind her. "Don't be late tomorrow," he said at the door. "They watch everything in that house." "I know." He smiled again, that terrifying, gentle smile, and then he kissed her cheek like he loved her. She closed the door the second he left. Locked it. Deadbolt. Chain. Then she slid down to the floor and cried into her hands. But only for a few seconds. She couldn't afford long emotions anymore. Midnight. Matteo sat in the dark. No lights. No music. Just the hum of the city through the windows. Enzo arrived carrying a folder the color of fresh blood. He dropped it on the table. It landed hard. His name's Julian Marks. No real medical license. No official doctorate. All his degrees come from online ghost schools. Matteo said nothing. He runs a cultural foundation that claims to give scholarships to international students. Mostly girls. All of them disappear after 6 months. Matteo turned a page. Photographs. Documents. Donation slips. "This isn't just abuse," Enzo added. "It's trafficking." Matteo paused. Then he opened another file. Photos from the restaurant. Julian's hand on Valentina's wrist. The grip. The squeeze. Her face. Eyes filled with something you don't fake. Matteo's jaw moved once, like a predator smelling blood. "How deep is he?" Enzo's voice lowered. "Deep. Politicians. Police. One of the city commissioners sits on the foundation's board." Matteo leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled beneath his chin. For a long time he didn't speak. Then finally, "Burn him." Enzo blinked. Loud or quiet? Matteo looked out at the skyline. "Let's start quiet." The next morning, Valentina woke up to a letter on her doorstep. No name, no return address, just a small envelope with her name written in perfect black ink. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single piece of paper. No threats, no cruelty, just 5 words. "Do not go tonight. Trust me." Her heart pounded. She ran to the window, but the street was empty. Had Julian seen it? Was it from him? Or Matteo? She closed the blinds. She backed away. She didn't go to the lesson that day. She called the penthouse and said she had a fever. Nico was disappointed. Matteo was not. He sat in his chair again, just like before, watching the piano room stay empty. But this time the silence meant something else. It meant the game had started. That night, Julian held a fundraiser at the Carlton Hotel. Black tie, champagne, a string quartet in the corner, smiles, speeches, cameras, and beneath all that glitter, monsters in tuxedos. Mateo didn't go. He didn't need to. His men were already inside, hidden, recording, collecting. Julian gave a speech about opportunity for the underprivileged. Everyone clapped. No one noticed the girl who disappeared last week from Bulgaria. No one asked about the Brazilian pianist who never made it home after her fellowship. But Mateo had names now, faces, proof, and he was going to make the whole city watch as they fell. At midnight, Enzo returned again, this time with a flash drive. Mateo watched the footage. Every second. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, and when it ended, he sat still for a long time. Upload it to the backup servers, he said. And then, Enzo asked. Mateo stood. His silhouette in the dark looked carved from war. Now, he said slowly, we make the untouchable feel hunted. In her apartment, Valentina couldn't sleep again. She stared at the letter on her table. She held it like a life raft. And deep in her heart, something dangerous sparked. Hope. But she didn't know the storm was only beginning. Because in 2 days, Julian would walk into Matteo Romano's home. Not as a fiancé, not as a predator, but as a business partner. And right behind him, Valentina's parents, looking to collect what they still believed they owned. But the girl they sold, she had changed. And the man they were about to meet, he wasn't the police. He wasn't a priest. He was a problem you didn't survive. Valentina showed up with a fresh bruise. Not on her skin, on her soul. Her smile was perfect again, like always. Her hair was tied tight, her blouse buttoned to the neck. But her eyes told the truth. Matteo was waiting in the living room. Not in the shadows this time. Not watching from afar. He stood in full light, arms crossed, sleeves rolled, tattoos crawling up his forearms like black vines. The sun hit the glass windows behind him, lighting him up like a silent storm. Valentina stepped inside with a smile. Matteo didn't smile back. Nico rushed up to her with his music sheets. Can we try Beethoven again today? I practiced. She smiled at him, softer now, like he was the only air in her lungs. Of course we can, she said. But her voice cracked on the word course. Matteo caught it. Every note, every tremble, every lie. Valentina walked to the piano. She knelt beside Nico, fixing his posture. Her hands moved slowly, careful, like she was afraid of being seen. She touched the keys like they were made of glass. Start from the fourth measure, she whispered. Nico began to play, but Matteo did not move. He stood there like a shadow in sunlight. His eyes never left her, not for a second. 10 minutes passed, then 20. When Nico paused to take a sip of water, Matteo finally spoke. Leave us, he said. Nico blinked. Why? Go to your room. I need to talk to Miss Valentina. The boy hesitated, then nodded slowly. He gathered his pages and left without a word. The room fell silent. Only the ticking of the antique wall clock remained. Valentina stood up, her hands folded in front of her. She looked at the marble floor. Matteo stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast. But when he spoke, the air seemed to stop breathing. You lied to me. She didn't respond. You said it was a fall, he said. Stairs. You said you were fine. I am, she said quickly. I'm fine. Her voice tried to stay strong, but it cracked again. Matteo stepped closer. His voice dropped lower. I don't need a confession. I don't need details. But I need to know something very simple. He looked straight into her eyes. Do you want help? Valentina's throat moved like she was swallowing glass. I can't, she whispered. You can, Matteo said. But I don't know if I should, she said back. He tilted his head slightly. She looked at him for the first time that day. Really looked. There was something in his eyes. Not pity. Not judgment. Something else. A dangerous kind of kindness. The kind that didn't ask for anything in return. Matteo spoke again. Calm. Clear. I will not ask again. If you want help, you will have it. But I don't chase people who run back to the fire. Valentina's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. I'm just his fiancée, she said softly. Not his prisoner. Matteo didn't answer, because he knew the truth. And so did she. After she left, Enzo appeared in the hallway. He had been listening from the shadows. Not spying. Guarding. Matteo didn't even turn around. Find out everything, he said. All of it. Already on it, Enzo replied. Go deeper, Matteo added. Don't stop until we hit bone. Enzo nodded once, then disappeared like smoke. By nightfall, the first wave of dirt had surfaced. Julian Marks had no medical license, no real diploma. The universities he listed on his bio, empty shells. The articles praising him, bought and planted. The foundation, a maze of offshore accounts. And the girls, young, mostly foreign, musical backgrounds, bright futures, stolen in silence. Enzo brought the file in at midnight, dropped it on Matteo's desk like it was made of lead. He didn't speak at first. Matteo turned each page slowly. Photos, flight logs, scholarships. But not a single student had ever finished their program. Most had never been seen again. Matteo stared at a list of names. Eleni, 19, Greece. Lucia, 21, Argentina. Rana, 20, Egypt. Dozens of them. All gone. Do we have proof? Matteo asked. Bank transfers, contracts, signatures. Enough to start a small war, Enzo replied. Does she know? Enzo hesitated. No, she probably suspects, but not this deep. Matteo stood up. He walked to the window and stared out over the city. The lights flickered. The streets moved like veins under skin. Then he turned, his voice colder than steel. No mercy. Later that night, Matteo walked down the hall. The penthouse was silent. Nico had been asleep for hours, but Matteo's feet moved slow, thoughtful. He stopped at his son's bedroom door, pushed it open just a little. Nico was curled up under his blanket, holding a small toy piano, breathing steady, dreaming. Matteo stood in the doorway. His eyes scanned the room, the soft nightlight, the bookshelf, the poster of a cartoon lion. But his mind was not here. He was thinking of Valentina's bruises, of girls who never came home, of the ones who were too scared to speak. He was thinking of the quiet way she said, I'm fine, like it was her only shield left. Matteo didn't speak, didn't blink, but in his heart, something cold hardened into stone. He had made decisions before, but never like this. This wasn't business. This wasn't loyalty. This was personal. And the next man who laid hands on that woman would never be able to lift them again. Not in this lifetime. Not in the next. At the same time, Valentina sat in her apartment. Lights off, curtains drawn. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. She held a photo in her hand. A picture of her and Julian. From the early days. Back when she thought he was kind. Smart. Safe. She had been so wrong. So stupid. She touched her own face in the photo. Her eyes looked so bright back then. Now they were tired. Now they were hiding. She heard a knock at the door. Her heart jumped. But it wasn't Julian. It was a letter, another envelope, slipped under her door. No stamp, no handwriting, just one word inside. Soon, she dropped it on the floor. Her hands trembled, but her heart, for the first time in a long time, it beat with something else. Not fear, not panic, but hope. At sunrise, Mateo stood on the penthouse balcony. He wore no suit, just a black shirt and bare arms. His tattoos looked darker in the morning light. The city stretched in every direction. Alive, loud, rotten beneath the shine. But not for long. Not if he had anything to say about it. Enzo stepped beside him, holding a fresh folder. "What now?" Enzo asked. Mateo took it, didn't even open it. He stared at the sun like it was a threat. "Now," he said, "we start peeling the mask off. And down below, somewhere in the chaos of streets and towers and lies, a man named Julian Marks was sipping coffee, thinking he was untouchable. He was wrong, very wrong, because the man who saw Valentina's bruises wasn't the police. He wasn't a friend. He was fire wearing skin, and fire never forgets where it saw smoke. Matteo Romano had been fighting shadows his whole life, but this time the shadows were wearing suits. They sat in city council meetings, smiled on magazine covers, made speeches about family and progress, and all of them were hiding the same thing. Julian's foundation wasn't just a lie. It was a tunnel, one that ran through law firms, police stations, charities, and courtrooms. And every brick in that tunnel was held in place by people with polished shoes and filthy hands. Started with a number, a transfer of $50,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. Enzo found it hidden inside a fake scholarship payment. Matteo traced it back to a woman who disappeared last summer. Then another, and another. 3 weeks after receiving money from Julian's foundation, each girl vanished. No goodbyes, no flights home, no calls to their families, just silence, and a closed case, missing, presumed runaway. Matteo didn't believe in coincidences, so he stopped asking questions and started collecting answers. In the basement of one of his safe houses, a quiet war had begun. Enzo brought in the tech team, Matteo's private hackers. They worked in silence, tapping into bank accounts, reading encrypted emails, and watching traffic flow through digital tunnels no one was supposed to find. Every name they uncovered made Matteo colder. A city councilman who received donations through his wife's nonprofit. A police captain whose son had interned for Julian's foundation. Even a judge. A man who once sentenced a trafficker to 6 months probation while citing lack of evidence. Matteo had seen monsters before, but never monsters wearing robes. Back in her apartment, Valentina could feel the walls closing in. Julian had started coming home earlier, asking more questions, going through her phone, looking at her with that smile again. The one that said, "I know you're lying, and I don't even have to say it." She hid what she could. She smiled when he looked. She kept quiet when he pressed. But the fear was building, and she didn't know how much longer she could pretend. She started packing small things. Clothes, passport, cash hidden in a coat pocket. She didn't tell anyone, not even Matteo, especially not Matteo, because if Julian ever found out, but Julian was already watching. The moment she tried to transfer money from her account, he knew. The moment she turned off her phone for too long, he felt it. And that night, when she walked into the apartment a little too quietly, she found him standing in the dark. No lights, just him, holding her suitcase. "Going somewhere?" he asked. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I was just visiting your parents? Planning a vacation? Hiding a little escape plan under your pretty piano skirts." She opened her mouth, but the words were gone. He stepped closer. His voice dropped. I told you before. You don't leave unless I say so. She tried to look strong, but her hands were shaking, and he saw it. He smiled, kissed her on the forehead, then whispered, You're mine, Valentina. Don't forget that. 2 days later, she vanished. Gone. No call. No message. No missed lesson. Not a trace. Enzo checked every camera near her apartment. The last footage showed her walking to the corner store. Then nothing. Her phone stopped pinging an hour later. She didn't get on a train. She didn't leave the city. She just disappeared. When Enzo broke the news to Matteo, the room fell still. No shouting. No rage. Just silence. The kind that warned of something worse than anger. Matteo stood by the window. The city moved beneath him, unaware. Unbothered. Enzo waited. Matteo finally spoke. Show me her last movements. The screens lit up. Footage. Street maps. Timestamps. Matteo watched it all. Frame by frame. Click by click. Until the last image. Her walking in the rain. Looking over her shoulder. Like she knew. Like she felt it. And then, nothing. Gone. Matteo stared at the black screen. And whispered to himself. I told her not to run back to the fire. He turned to Enzo. Eyes colder than a butcher's freezer. No more silence, he said. We burn them all. The digital war exploded overnight. Julian's foundation accounts were emptied. An anonymous source leaked internal emails to 3 newspapers. Photos, letters, financial records, each file more damning than the last. Politicians started denying things. Lawyers started stuttering. The judge resigned without warning. And still, no one said Julian's name. Not yet, but they would. Matteo would make sure of it. Because Valentina hadn't vanished by accident. She had gotten too close. She had seen something. Something she wasn't supposed to see. And someone had taken her for it. Now, the game was no longer about justice. It was about vengeance. The kind that didn't end in court. The kind that ended in darkness. Julian felt it too. He could feel the cracks forming. His secretary quit without notice. One of his volunteers leaked a list of names. The press started circling like bloodhounds. And at night he couldn't sleep. Because something felt wrong. Something felt close. And every time he looked out his window, he half expected to see a figure standing in the rain. Silent. Waiting. But no one came. Not yet. Julian told himself it was fine. He still had friends. He still had protection. But deep down he knew. The man with the tattoos had noticed the bruises. And that man wasn't built to let things go. He was built for revenge. Back in the penthouse, Matteo stood over his son's piano. The lid was closed. The music sheets were untouched. The room felt empty. He placed his hand on the top of the piano and closed his eyes. He saw her face again. The way she looked when she lied. The fear in her voice when she said she was fine. And now she was gone. And the people who took her were still smiling on television. Matteo opened his eyes. The time for watching was over. The network would fall. One name at a time. One lie at a time. And when it did, she would either be found or avenged. But either way, someone was going to bleed. The letter wasn't long. Just one sentence. Slipped into a 10-year-old's backpack at school. No name. No signature. Just 10 ugly little words. Keep your father out of this, or your music ends. It was written in perfect block letters. Folded into a page of sheet music. And it hit Matteo harder than a bullet. Nico handed the letter to his father that night. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just walked into the living room, pale and quiet, and said, Dad, someone gave me this. Matteo unfolded the paper. Read the sentence once, twice. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted, like a glass wall cracking without sound. Did you see who gave this to you? He asked. Nico shook his head. No, it was just there, in my music folder. Matteo nodded once. He hugged his son, just for a second. Then he stood up and made a phone call. Only 4 words. Seal the house. Now. 10 minutes later, the penthouse changed. Blinds closed. Cameras activated. Guards posted at every door. Enzo arrived in under 20. Armed. Ready. Matteo handed him the letter. Enzo didn't say anything at first. Then he looked up and asked the only question that mattered. You want this quiet? Matteo's answer was ice cold. No. I want them screaming. The war began before sunrise. Matteo opened the vault. Not of guns, but information. 10 years of files. Private recordings. Archived emails. Bribery logs. Everything he'd collected on the city's elite. He didn't send it to the police. He sent it to the press. An anonymous leak hit every major news station in the city. Within hours, headlines exploded. Cultural foundation tied to missing women. Councilman implicated in human trafficking ring. Judge under investigation for case tampering. Every name tied to Julian's network was dragged into the light. Photos, transfers, receipts. Matteo released them all, one by one, like firecrackers, and the city caught fire. Politicians held emergency press conferences. Some cried. Some denied everything. But it was too late. The evidence was real. Too real. One senator resigned on live television. A police captain was suspended before lunch. By the end of the day, 2 board members of Julian's foundation had fled the country. And still, Valentina was nowhere to be found. Matteo sat in his office, watching the footage of news anchors stutter through scandals they couldn't explain. He didn't blink. He didn't celebrate, because the only thing he wanted wasn't on the screen. Her. Valentina. The girl who smiled through bruises. The girl who said she was fine when she was breaking. He had found 100 criminals. But not the one thing that mattered most. That night, Enzo returned with something new. A video file. No sender. No subject line. Just a timestamp. Matteo played it. The screen lit up with grainy footage. A room. Dim. Concrete walls. A woman tied to a chair. Blindfolded. Shivering. It wasn't clear. But Matteo knew. He knew the curve of her shoulders. The angle of her jaw. Valentina. He froze the frame. Enzo stared. How recent? Matteo asked. 2 days. Maybe 3. We're checking every detail. Matteo didn't speak. He couldn't. His hand moved slowly. He pressed his palm against the screen. Right over her image. I told her she could come here, he said quietly. I told her. Across town, Julian watched the news from his hotel suite. His smile was gone. His hands shook as he poured his drink. His phone rang nonstop. Donors pulling out. Lawyers demanding answers. His foundation was unraveling. Faster than he expected. He smashed the glass against the wall. Who's doing this? He screamed. But he knew. There was only one man who could rip down a city in 24 hours without touching a single gun. Matteo Romano. And Julian had poked the wrong lion. Enzo's team worked through the night. They enhanced the video, isolated the background noise, tracked the watermark on the chair. A manufacturer, a warehouse district, a building, an address. Matteo didn't wait for backup. He didn't wait for a plan. He got into the car and drove into the dark. But when he got there, she was gone. The building was cold and empty. Blood on the floor. A broken shoe. A piano key snapped in half. Her piano key. He picked it up with shaking hands, then turned to Enzo, who had followed behind. They moved her, Matteo said. Enzo nodded grimly. But not far. They're scared now. Matteo didn't blink. Good. He looked at the key again. Let them be scared. Back in the penthouse, Nico waited up. He sat in the piano room, not touching the keys, just staring. When Matteo walked in, he looked up. Did you find her? Matteo shook his head. Not yet. Nico stood, walked over, and handed his father a music sheet. It was the same one Valentina had used for their last lesson. On the bottom corner, she had scribbled a note in pencil, small, almost invisible. Never let them silence your song. Matteo read it, then looked at his son. You won't be silenced, he said. Neither will she. By morning, the news had changed again. Now they were calling it the reckoning. The press had started naming names. The headlines screamed. The people whispered. The empire of lies was crumbling. And behind it all, one question remained. Where was Valentina Russo? Matteo didn't have the answer yet. But he was close. Closer than ever. And the next person who stood in his way would not live to regret it. Matteo stood in the middle of the warehouse, eyes locked on the cold cement floor. It smelled like gasoline and mold. There were chains in the corner, a stained mattress tossed in the dark. But there was no girl, no Valentina, only echoes and silence. Enzo stepped over a metal beam. He was holding a folder. Thin. Useless. Nothing, he said. No prints. No cameras. Just dust. Matteo didn't answer. His jaw clenched. He had arrived at this place with hope clutched tight in his fist. But hope was slipping through his fingers like smoke. A second lead came 2 hours later. A shallow grave. Outside the city. Burned remains. Female. The same height. Same shoe size. The fire had eaten everything. Even the fingerprints. Matteo drove there himself. Enzo tried to stop him. But he had to see. He had to know. He stood over the body. The air stank of ash and old rain. The coroner couldn't confirm identity. Only guesses. Only pain. Matteo didn't flinch. He just looked down at the charred form and said, almost silently, "This is not her." "How can you be sure?" Enzo asked softly. Matteo didn't blink. "Because if it was, I'd be dead already." Back at the penthouse, Matteo stood at his piano again. He pressed one key, then another, not playing, just feeling. He remembered her fingers on the ivory, so careful, so gentle. She had played with the grace of someone born into pain. But now all he could hear was the hollow echo, and a silence that hurt too much. Enzo came in just after midnight. "There's movement," he said. "Julian's making a public appearance." Matteo turned his head slowly. "Where?" "Fundraising gala," Enzo said. "Downtown. Invitation only. Full red carpet. News cameras. Celebrities. Politicians." "For what cause?" Matteo asked. Enzo's face twisted. "For at-risk youth." Matteo let out a breath that wasn't a laugh. He nodded once. Then his voice dropped. "Put eyes everywhere. Inside. Outside. Roof. Kitchen. Bathrooms. If he so much as blinks too long, I want to know." Enzo leaned in. "There's something else. We're running through every property tied to the foundation." Matteo turned to face him. "And we found something strange. A purchase in the suburbs. Under a fake name. A one-story house. No mortgage, no utilities on file, no paper trail." Matteo's eyes narrowed. "Send 2 men. Not soldiers. Clean ones." Enzo was already dialing. The house sat at the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac. No neighbor's home. Curtains drawn. No sound. You wouldn't look at it twice. But Luca, Enzo's field man, stepped up to the front door like it was ticking. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. Then he used the old trick. Credit card. Door frame. Quiet breath. Click. The door eased open. The air inside was thick, heavy with something wrong. He stepped in. It was dark. Shades pulled. Furniture bare. But then he heard it. A soft, slow breath. From the back room. He followed it. Down a hall. 1 step. 2. 3. Then he saw her. Lying on a thin mattress on the floor. Blanket over her. Still breathing. Barely. Her wrists had faint red lines. Her lips were dry. Her skin pale like paper. Luca whispered. Found her. He knelt beside her. Valentina, he said gently. Can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered. Tried to open. Failed. But she moved her mouth. Just a whisper. One name. Julian. Then she went limp. Luca picked her up like she was made of glass. Tell Matteo, he said into the radio. We have her. Matteo didn't breathe until he saw her. He stood in the private clinic under his building. No doctors from the city. Only people he trusted. Valentina lay on the hospital bed, eyes closed, and 4 in her arm. Clean sheets. Soft light. Peaceful now. But Matteo saw past it. He saw the bruises on her arms, the mark on her neck. He saw what had been done. And he didn't ask her for a story. He didn't need it, because he already knew the ending would be written in blood. Hours passed. She didn't wake. Matteo sat in the corner, watching, waiting. Enzo entered, quiet as a whisper. She's stable, he said. Doctor says she's going to make it. Matteo nodded. Good. There's more. Matteo looked at him. We found a receipt in the house. For food delivery. Same card used to pay for one of Julian's cars. Matteo's mouth moved just slightly. Confirmation. Yeah, it's him. Matteo stood up, walked to her bedside. He reached out, gently brushed her hair back. Her skin twitched at his touch. She whispered something again, too soft to hear, but her lips moved like prayer. Matteo leaned in, and this time he whispered too. You're safe now. Then he looked at Enzo, his voice sharp as broken glass. The gala? Tonight, Enzo said. Red carpet starts at 8. Matteo nodded once. Make sure the world is watching. Back at the penthouse, Nico asked only one question. Is she okay? Matteo looked down at his son. She will be, he said. Are you going to find who did it? Matteo didn't smile, didn't lie. He just said the truth. They already know I'm coming. Nico nodded, then said the last thing his father expected. Can I come with you? Matteo blinked. No. Why not? Because where I'm going, Matteo said, is a place you never need to see. And in his mind, the piano played again. But this time it wasn't music. It was a warning. And it was coming for Julian. Louder than any storm. Stronger than any lie. The curtain was rising. And the final act had just begun. The gala was gold. Gold walls. Gold lights. Gold dresses. Gold lies. Crystal glasses clinked under chandeliers. Violin music floated like perfume. And in the center of it all, smiling like the king of something rotten, stood Julian Marks. He wore a velvet tuxedo, charcoal, polished shoes, a red pocket square to match the red in his eyes. He laughed, shook hands, kissed cheeks. No one knew what he had done. Not yet. Not until the doors opened, and Matteo Romano walked in. Silence didn't fall right away. Crawled in slowly. One head turned, then another, until the room stopped breathing. Matteo didn't come alone. But he didn't come with guards either. He walked in like a ghost in a silk suit, black jacket, midnight shirt, no tie, no apology. His hair slicked back, rings on his fingers, a thin scar near his jawline catching the light like silver thread. He walked through the room like it belonged to him, because it did now. This was not a visit. This was a funeral, and everyone there knew it, even if they didn't know whose. Julian froze when he saw him, but only for a second. He recovered fast, lifted a glass, walked over like nothing was wrong. "Mr. Romano," he said with a perfect smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." Matteo didn't smile. He looked him over once. Down. Then he said quietly, "You know what I hate?" Julian blinked. "Excuse me? I hate when someone touches what's mine." Julian chuckled, a nervous edge under the sound. "I'm afraid I don't understand." Matteo stepped closer. No drama, no shouting, just inches from his ear. "You hurt someone under my roof." Julian's smile cracked. Matteo's voice dropped into a whisper. "That's your death sentence." Julian didn't speak. Couldn't. His mouth opened, then closed. Matteo turned and walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't need to, because that was the last time anyone ever saw Julian Marks alive. The gala went on. Music returned. The wine kept pouring. But something had changed. The room felt colder. The lights felt fake. People whispered behind champagne glasses. Some asked questions. Most stayed silent, because everyone had seen it. That moment, that quiet moment between two men. One dressed for war, the other dressed for death. By midnight, Julian was gone. Just gone. Not a goodbye. Not a witness. The only thing left behind was a broken wine glass near the back exit. And a red stain on the floor. No police were called. No investigation was opened. No statements were given. Because in this city, some disappearances don't need answers. They only need silence. And silence came quickly. News outlets ran polite headlines the next morning. Julian Marks missing, close friends concerned. Cultural Foundation CEO steps away from duties. Private matters, no comment. But the streets knew the truth. The waiters knew. The drivers knew. The woman who found the shattered glass knew. This wasn't a scandal. It was justice. Old-fashioned, unspoken, sharp, and permanent. Back at the penthouse, Matteo didn't pour a drink. He didn't celebrate. He just stood on the balcony as the wind pulled at his shirt. Enzo joined him, quiet. "Clean hit," Enzo said. Matteo didn't move. No trace. No cameras. No chatter. "The body will never be found." Matteo nodded. Enzo glanced at him. Was it enough? Matteo didn't answer, because he knew the truth. This wasn't about enough. This was about balance. And tonight the scale had shifted. Valentina woke up just after dawn. She opened her eyes slowly. The bed was soft. The light was warm. And her chest didn't feel tight anymore. A nurse smiled down at her. "You're safe," she said gently. "You're safe now." Valentina tried to sit up. "Where?" "You're in a private clinic. You've been resting." Valentina blinked. Tears slipped down her cheek without her even noticing. "Is he?" she whispered. The nurse didn't ask who. She just nodded. "It's over." Valentina exhaled for the first time in days. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her again. This time without nightmares. Nico sat at the piano. He played slow, careful, one note at a time. Then the door opened. Valentina stood there, still pale, still healing, but standing. Nico's eyes lit up. "You're back," she smiled. Soft, tired, but real. He ran to her, hugged her like a little boy who'd waited forever. I missed you, he said. She knelt, held him close. I missed you too. Then she stood, looked across the room, and saw him, Matteo, standing in the corner, watching, not speaking. Valentina stepped forward. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just looked him in the eye and whispered, "You came for me." Matteo said nothing. He just nodded once. She smiled, and in that smile was something quiet, something free. She turned back to the piano. Nico sat down beside her. She took his hands, placed them on the keys. "Again," she said, "from the top." And the music began. Soft, pure, alive. The city was burning, not with fire, but with truth. Hot, wild, unstoppable. Every name Matteo had collected, every file, every transfer, every secret. He opened the vault and let the smoke pour out. It started with a late-night news alert, just a whisper on the screen. Anonymous data leak hits key political figures. Then another. Wire transfers link cultural foundation to human trafficking scandal. By sunrise, it wasn't whispers anymore. It was thunder. The files came in waves. Thousands of pages. PDFs. Spreadsheets. Bank logs. Security footage. From 20 years back. Everything the city thought it had buried. Everything hidden behind money, titles, silence. Now open. Now burning. Senators. COs. Detectives. Judges. Charity leaders. All tied to Julian's foundation. All wrapped in red string. Each file had a timestamp. Each timestamp had a signature. And none of them belonged to the living, because the ghost of Julian Marks was screaming through every document. And Matteo made sure everyone could hear him. In the safe house, Valentina watched from the couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, hair pulled back, eyes wide. Her tea had gone cold in her hands. The screen showed their faces, those men who once smiled for cameras, now ducking behind jackets, rushing into courtrooms, stuttering into microphones, one after another, falling like rotten trees. One senator tried to claim innocence. The media aired a video of him shaking hands with Julian in front of a wall of missing girls' portraits. Another tried to deny knowing anything. The next morning, an audio leak surfaced. His voice, clear, calm, saying, "As long as the money keeps coming, I don't care where the girls go." Valentina covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. Not sadness. Something sharper. The kind of tears that come when the world finally listens. Outside the safe house, the city changed. People marched. People screamed. People tore down banners with Julian's name on them. Murals were painted for the girls who didn't come back. The news stations played interviews with survivors. They played Valentina's name. "She was the one who cracked it," the anchor said. "The brave piano teacher who stood her ground." She turned off the TV and sat in silence, because it wasn't bravery. Not to her. It was fear. Fear that screamed too loud to stay quiet anymore. She didn't ask for justice, but somehow she got vengeance instead. Matteo didn't smile. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't show his face. He watched from his penthouse as the city unraveled. Not with pride, not with revenge, but with purpose, because he had built his world on balance. And now, finally, the scales were even. Enzo stood beside him, watching another arrest play out on live television. "That's the police chief's brother," Enzo said. Matteo didn't react. "He's crying," Enzo added. Still no response. Then Matteo finally spoke. "Let him cry." He turned away from the screen, poured a glass of water, and said, "Let every single one of them cry." The government held a press conference. Sweaty men in suits promised reform, promised oversight, promised action. But the people weren't listening anymore. Because they didn't trust suits. They trusted scars. And Matteo had given them scars they could see. Scars that told a story. Of silence broken. Of rot exposed. Of power turned to ash. Valentina stepped outside for the first time in weeks. She wore a hat. Big sunglasses. She didn't want to be seen. But she needed the air. The garden outside the safe house was blooming. Roses. Lilies. Soft things growing in soft dirt. She knelt beside a white flower and touched its petals. They trembled under her fingers. Just like she had. Just like so many others had. A nurse came out. "There's a letter for you." Valentina stood. Opened it with careful hands. Inside was a note. Plain paper. Simple ink. "You are not broken. You are not owned. You are not alone. M." She held the paper to her chest. And for the first time in years, she smiled without pain behind it. Matteo sat at his desk. A single envelope on the table. Inside it was Valentina's hospital report. Photos. Injuries. Blood work. He had already seen it. But he looked at it again. Not because he needed to. Because he couldn't stop. He touched the corner of the paper. Then he set it on fire. Watched the flames eat it whole. Let it vanish. Because it no longer needed to exist. She had survived. And that was the only truth that mattered now. The mayor resigned. The judge fled the country. The CEO was arrested at his daughter's piano recital. Everything they built had fallen. And the city whispered one name. Not Julian. Not the foundation. But the man who tore it all down. They whispered it in fear. And sometimes, in awe. Matteo Romano. The ghost in the system. The storm in the shadows. The balance keeper. Valentina didn't go back to the penthouse. Not yet. She needed time. She needed quiet. But one evening she called. Matteo answered on the first ring. There was silence. Then her voice. "I just wanted to say thank you." He didn't respond. She continued. "You saved me." Still no answer. Then soft and deep. "No," he said. "You saved yourself. I just made sure the world saw it." She closed her eyes. Felt tears slip down. But they were warm this time. Not bitter. Not scared. Just soft. Like her. Like the flower blooming in the garden. Like something finally growing again. Matteo hung up the phone. He walked to the balcony. Looked out at the skyline. It was cleaner now. Quieter. But he knew the peace wouldn't last. It never did. Still, for tonight it was enough. He lit a cigarette. Took one drag. And said into the wind, "Let the devils sleep. Their kingdom is dust now." And behind him, in the quiet of the room, the piano sat still. Waiting. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Valentina stepped into the penthouse, slower than before, but with steady feet. She was dressed in soft beige, hair loose, skin warm from the sun. She had color in her cheeks now, breath in her voice. But the scar on her wrist peeked out when she reached for her purse. And Matteo saw it. He didn't flinch, because scars told stories. And hers was not a story of weakness. It was survival carved in skin. The penthouse was still grand. Still gold and marble and shadow. But today it felt lighter. The curtains were open. The sun poured in. And from the other room, a melody floated through the air. Nico was playing. Not a scale. Not an exercise. Real music. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Soft. Confident. Clean. Each note rang out like truth. Matteo stood by the window watching the city below. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You look different," he said. Valentina smiled gently. "I feel different." He motioned to the couch. She sat. They didn't speak right away. They just listened. to Nico's hands dancing over keys, to a boy finding his voice, to a world finally quiet. "I didn't come to stay long," Valentina said after a while. "I know. I just needed to see it. One more time." Matteo nodded. He poured her a glass of water. No wine, no bravado, just clean, cool stillness. She sipped, looked around. Her fingers traced the edge of the glass. "This place used to scare me," she admitted. "The marble, the silence. You." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened just enough to notice. "And now?" he asked. Valentina looked at him. Direct, calm. "Now it feels like the only place I didn't have to lie." Matteo looked down at the floor, at the polished stone that had once caught a drop of blood. He remembered that moment, the bruise, the fear in her eyes, the silent promise he had made to himself. He spoke without looking up. "You got yourself out," he said. "I just gave you space to stand." Valentina's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She had no more tears left, only peace. In the next room, Nico played his last note. It echoed for a second, hung in the air like magic. Then silence. Matteo's voice broke it. "He's better because of you." Valentina turned to him. "He was already good." "No," Matteo said. He was scared, like her music would disappear forever. She nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling." Then she stood, brushed down her blouse, set the glass gently on the marble. At the door she turned back, one hand on the handle. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" Matteo raised his eyes. "Of course." She paused, then asked the question that had been haunting her from the start. "Why did you really help me?" The room grew still. Even the air seemed to pause. Matteo stepped forward. He didn't hide behind cold eyes or clever words. He answered with the truth. "Because," he said, "no one under this roof bleeds alone." She looked at him for a long moment, not with fear, not with gratitude, just understanding. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that said thank you without saying thank you. She opened the door, walked into the light, and left behind the ghost of everything that tried to break her. Matteo stood alone. The door clicked shut. He walked back into the piano room. Nico had left a music sheet on the bench. Moonlight Sonata, second page. Matteo didn't sit. He just reached out. His hand brushed over the polished marble near the piano's base. He remembered the blood, the moment, the shift, that one night that turned everything upside down. And then he looked outside. The city stretched far and wide, but it didn't roar like it used to. It was cleaner now, quieter, balanced. For now. Matteo turned back to the piano, pressed one key. The note was soft, low, perfect. Then silence again. But this time it wasn't empty. It was peace, not forever, but for today. And for today, it was enough.